Hey everyone, welcome to Myopia Movies, and one of the few episodes that I'm not on. This is an episode we did when I was on paternity leave, but it's a solid return to form kind of episode, and besides, it's a good one that was behind the Patreon paywall, so let's dust it off, take it out, and let everyone get a fresh listen to The Rocketeer, a movie I enjoyed very much when I was a kid, but had not revisited until they recorded the movie, and I felt like seeing it. So thanks for sharing. Thanks for doing all you do to keep us in the charts. And please continue to do so. Thanks, everyone.
Welcome to Myopia Movies. This week, we are looking at Timothy Dalton as a Nazi. We've watched The Rocketeer, the Disney movie from 1991. I am your temporary host, Daniel, contributor to popdose.com. And on panel, we have
Atlanta author Matthew W. Quinn,
Charlie Rose,
and John, host of Mission Briefing here on the Myopia Network.
Well, thank you all very much for joining me tonight. As you can tell, I'm not Nick. He's taking a leave of absence because apparently he had one of those children things. I don't know. I've heard of them. I don't think I've ever actually seen one, but he's on a bit of paternity leave. So right now, it's going to be me as your humble guide throughout this. And today we've got a fun one that we're talking about. We've got The Rocketeer, as said. It's based on a comic book from the 80s, and Disney turned it into a movie directed by future Captain America Helmer Joe Johnston, who also did previous episodes Jumanji, The Pagemaster, Jurassic Park 3, and Honey, I Shrunk the Kids.
And some people consider this a spiritual prequel to Captain America, the First Avenger.
Who would that be, Matt, exactly?
Yeah, do they?
Well, someone posted on the TV Tropes page for it.
Yes, of course. It's not a Myopia episode without a reference to TV tropes.
All hail.
So, Charlie, you were talking to me off mic about how you remember this movie as a kid. What did you remember before watching it again for this episode?
great question. I remember a couple things. I remember that it was Nazis. I remember that awesome leather, like flight shirt with those buttons and the V. I really wanted more of those. And I remember Jennifer Connelly's breasts.
They are certainly in this movie.
Yeah,
I
definitely.
saw that. That was one of the first movies I saw when I moved to East Cobb. I was about 7. I don't remember the boob jokes.
Oh, yeah, it was.
They were there.
They were there. This was. I actually went to see it with a bunch of friends. I think it was my sophomore year, right after I got my driver's license. This was a great movie. Oh my gosh. I just remember it being fun and cheesy and full of weird jokes that I didn't quite understand.
Well, first and foremost, in the comics, my understanding is that Jennifer Connelly's character was basically Betty Page, which absolutely is not the case in this movie.
Yeah, she's a lot more wholesome in this one.
Mm-hmm.
That's one way of putting it, Matt. Another thing is just how seeped in adventure tropes this is. I mean, this was supposed to be Indiana Jones, right? But I don't know if they really quite nailed that. John, you as the Bond expert, because Indiana Jones is the Bond knockoff, what did you think?
Oh, I loved this movie. Like Charlie, I remember seeing this. I don't think I saw it in the theater, but I saw it probably soon after. But I remember loving the action and all that, and watching it again. I haven't seen it probably since the first time I've seen it, and the nostalgia in it nails that 1930s vibe. Like even the poster, like I'm looking at the picture of the poster, it's got that Art Deco kind of strong angles and action and bright colors, things like that, all going for it. And it just draws you in. And I suppose it is hard to not compare it to Indiana Jones, especially the Temple of Doom, because they've got a lot of the Art Deco, like the opening scenes are in casinos, and they're very awesome, very suave. They've got that 1930s style, and Nazis and blimps. It goes a long way.
This is basically one of the few diesel punk movies I'm aware of.
You're right.
Yeah, it is.
Like my first thought coming back to it as an adult is, oh, this is diesel punk. Okay. All right.
Now, I never saw this as a kid myself, but what I did see in high school, I think I was 16 at the time, was a movie called Sky Captain and the World of Tomorrow. Does
This is
anyone?
a better movie.
Yeah,
Much
it
better.
is.
We can discuss whether it was a better movie, but it was certainly a similar movie to this, with
Yeah.
with 125% less dead Laurence Olivier.
That was creepy.
It sure was. Instead, we get a live Timothy Dalton as, spoiler alert, a Nazi.
And
He was one of the best parts about this movie.
and the evil lord of the casting couch, who for some reason has a closet full of women's clothes.
Yeah.
Yeah, that wasn't creepy.
Very, very creepy. And, chloroform constantly.
He just happens to have chloroform on him.
Yeah, on a date with a beautiful woman, sure, let's bring some chloroform.
We call that the Clark Gable boudoir back in the day. But anyway, let's get more into this. Matt, I haven't talked to you yet. Do you want to give us the plot synopsis?
Oh, hell yes.
Go ahead.
All right, so it's 1930s, and some Nazi spies steal a jetpack from the laboratory of none other than Howard Hughes. And there's an FBI police chase, and they end up stashing it in an airfield where this test pilot named Cliff Secord and his much older mechanic friend have their stunt plane, which the stunt planes are being shot down in the process of the fight with the Nazis. And he finds a jetpack and gets mixed up in all this stuff involving the Nazis, the mafia, the FBI. And he mentions he's dating this actress who I think hasn't got around to telling her he loves her and just can't spit it out. And she's getting crept on by evil, not Errol Flynn.
Yeah, no, that was definitely supposed to be Errol Flynn, although I don't even think Errol Flynn was a Nazi. He was just a drunk.
Well, he was accused of being a Nazi. It turns out he wasn't.
Right, but anyway, keep going, Matt. What else is going on here?
Oh, a lot of flight sequences, including him falling off a plane 3 times. He tries to save a pilot who's been knocked unconscious. A dude almost gets his face burned on an oven. It turns out you really shouldn't be constantly antagonizing your hired goons. And they mentioned a dirigible. Yeah, someone mentioned a Zeppelin earlier. Oh, this was fun, especially the last half.
Yeah, there sure was a lot of fun things, and one of the big standouts to me was the cast of this movie. You've got honestly, the Rocketeer is probably the least big star name in this movie. We mentioned Jennifer Connelly. The old friend that Matt was talking about was Alan Arkin.
Mm-hmm.
We've got Tim Dalton. We've got
Paul Sorvino.
Paul Sorvino's in this movie, and whoever played Lauter, which had to be somebody, because that guy makes quite a presence.
Yeah, the kid. I call him the kiddie version of Freddy Krueger. I mean, look at him.
He's listed as Tiny Ron.
Tiny Ron Taylor.
That is a lie. That is a goddamn lie. That man is not a Tiny Ron.
He was in The Rocketeer, Ace Ventura, Deep Space Nine, Voyager, Police Squad. Oh.
What was he in? Okay, is there a giant big dude in Ace Ventura? Because I don't remember one.
Apparently.
Wait, in Police Squad, was he that really tall coroner's assistant in The Naked Gun? Okay.
He was the guy who was just out of frame every single time he showed up.
And they made him look like a Dick Tracy villain in this.
I'm surprised he wasn't in Dick Tracy, because that's what I initially thought when I saw him.
Yeah.
I have no idea what he actually looks like. Even his Wikipedia doesn't have a picture.
Probably better looking than
that. Picture of him. Apparently, he does a lot of work for stunts as well.
Well, I mean, Lothar was definitely a standout of this movie to me. But let's take it back to the beginning. It opens on an airfield, and it's an amateur pilot testing a new aircraft, which I have to be honest, the one thing about this movie, to me at least, that kind of dragged it back is you get these brief scenes of action, and then you just get such tedious nonsense. But this opening is great. It's clear that Martin Scorsese ripped this off for The Aviator about a dozen years later.
If you told me The Aviator was set in the same universe as this, I would believe you. We're introduced to Howard Hughes as the guy who created the rocket.
Except he looks nothing like the actual Howard Hughes did.
He looks more like the guy who's Tony Stark's dad in the Marvel universe.
He looks like a cross between Walt Disney and Hedley Lamarr from Blazing Saddles.
It's the little mustache.
Yes.
So many pencil thin mustaches. This is very 30s.
I think there's a point for that.
Well, I have to say, I give them props because they really just, whether it's the costumes or the dialogue or the setting, it really captured the feel of the late 30s. This whole right on the edge of a war with Germany. The feeling is there, and it was beautiful the way they executed it.
Frankly, I like the Bonnie and Clyde chase scene that happens right after the test flight, where it's a bunch of the G-men, trying to shoot these thieves who've stolen the rocket with Tommy guns. And had they actually done this like Bonnie and Clyde, this would have gotten an R rating.
Oh, yeah.
So many Tommy guns.
And so little hit.
Well, and that's the thing. I mean, it's like none of this is actually accurate to the 30s, but it is accurate to what we perceive as being the late 30s. It is accurate to the genre, to the movies that came about during that era. So it just captured the feel beautifully with that initial car chase scene and all the dialogue, the really over the top, ridiculous, cheesy dialogue. And the accents.
I mean, John Polito is in this movie as the owner of the hangar. How much more 30s can you get?
I'm just glad they didn't go full on 30s like they did in The Aviator, where it was it Katharine Hepburn, like with that really obnoxious like New York accent where they're just talking through their nose.
That's just how she talked.
It was annoying.
That's the mid-Atlantic accent.
That mid-Atlantic accent, actually.
Yes.
That no longer exists, fortunately.
Thankfully.
Yeah, thank God.
I couldn't stand that movie.
The only thing we have to fear is Howard Hughes,
who thankfully doesn't have that accent. But I did love. It's in his first scene. It was hard to get a feel for him. He was saying he didn't want to work for the government, like he didn't want to make engines of war. Which I have no idea if that was true for Howard Hughes or not, because I mean he still effectively created the Japanese Zero plane, even though it was accidental. And they had that when Cliff is escaping when he's captured toward the end, he jumps on the model of a plane and flies it out, and it's the spruce goose.
Yes, that's exactly what
and
that
Hughes
was.
goes, "It can fly."
Exactly. And you're just like, uh-huh. And
if you don't know what he's talking about,
cheesy
then it
moments
makes
like
no
that.
sense. But it was gorgeous.
Yeah.
Of course, every time I see a scene like that, I just think of Mr. Burns going, "I said hop in."
I was going to say, they did have a lot of wink and a nod scenes, just throughout this movie. They were definitely building a family movie the entire time.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, well, goodness gracious, it was what, Joe Johnston that was directing it?
Yes.
Exactly.
Who's got a very spotty record. Sometimes he's good, sometimes he's horrible.
Hey, I loved all of his, I hated The Wolfman. But I really loved everything else, like Honey, I Shrunk the Kid,
October Sky.
Jumanji, October Sky, great movie.
Yeah.
October Sky
God.
is a great movie, but are you going to stick your neck out for Jurassic Park 3?
Oh,
Hidalgo. Oof.
okay. Well, maybe let's just say after the 2000s, he sucks, except for Captain America.
The Page Master. That's my response to that.
That was okay.
Anyway, we...
Wait, was that the cartoon one?
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, God. Yeah, never mind. I take that back.
Anyway, we've talked about the opening with the experimental plane, and then we've talked about the G-men are trying to nail their men who've stolen the rocket, and the two plots converge because the car chase ends up on the runway, and then the plane gets damaged first because a thief shoots at the motor, and then it as it's trying to land on the runway, it crashes into the escaping car.
Yes, but right before that, the mob guy who had stolen the rocket swapped it out for a
Vacuum.
old school vacuum cleaner
Yes.
and hid the rocket in the hangar in the plane that is owned by the lead in this Mr. what was his name?
Cliff.
Secord.
Secord. Yeah.
Secord.
We also get
And
two
so-
other things in the opening. We get a Chekhov's chewing gum, and we get the picture of Jennifer Connelly that he keeps in his cockpit.
Oh, that's right. And both of those, well, it could be Chekhov's picture too, because that picture's coming back.
So this is really the first 20 minutes or so of the movie. It's the car chase, it's the takeoff. We're introduced to the mob. We're introduced to Cliff, and then we get Cliff punching an FBI agent, which is always a whole lot of fun.
Mm-hmm.
And
our hero has to be anti-authority, anti-establishment. He's a rogue. He's a man who lives by his own rules. He's a maverick.
well, anyway,
Really?
You're right.
I mean, okay.
Hey Matt, what does TV tropes have to say about this?
Says shut up.
You know what? Well done, good sir. Well done.
I mean,
I feel like Ron Burgundy in this moment. I'm not even mad. That's impressive.
I mean,
What?
he the old lady who's running the house where Jenny lives tells him he's not a gentleman, or he says he's not a gentleman. He's not bad at all.
Well, I mean, she was like this uptight Puritan who didn't no men in my house after 6 o'clock in the evening.
Well,
and Jenny has a curfew on her date.
Yep.
well, I mean,
11 o'clock.
it was one of those women's hotels that existed back then
Yeah.
for single women to live in.
Got to keep Clark Gable out somehow.
Yeah. It's either that or a spray bottle, one of the two. All right. So before we get to that women's hotel, though, two things happen. First, the one thief stows the actual rocket away, and where he hides it is in this old plane that Alan Arkin and Cliff used for a quote unquote clown act. But now that their new plane's destroyed, the one that was going to take them to nationals, even though I don't think they ever explained what that means.
Sounds like some sort of flying tournament.
That's fine, but they never actually explained that in the movie. Apparently, we just have to care that it's nationals.
Well, yes, of course.
Anyway, the owner of their hangar, John Polito, basically says, hey, you still owe me rent, and I don't care if your actual plane was destroyed, you got to pay it. So they agree to revive their own old clown show. And while they're testing out the old plane, Cliff jumps in and immediately sits on something under the seat.
Dun, 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 dun.
Just so happens to be the MacGuffin.
Yes, indeed. What do you guys think of this rocket? Do you think it was a good prop, a bad prop?
I liked it. I mean, it's solid. It's not obvious CGI. It looks like it actually spews fire.
Yeah, I mean, it looked good. They built it, and they built it so that the effects worked well with it. Okay,
Yeah.
because it didn't look bad.
Even though I'm surprised the rocket didn't burn off Cliff's legs.
I think there's like something at the bottom that keeps the fire pointed in the right direction.
I guess that would have to be.
Yeah, there'd have to be.
It's time to look up the picture, I guess.
Well, I mean,
It's called narrative plot.
To be fair, there is a scene where they turn the rocket on, it burns and goes all around. They shut it off and then touch it, which normally would burn the hell out of their hands. But then one of them actually turns to the other. It's like the casing's still cool. So they're at least acknowledging how this would work.
They said it runs on alcohol, but can alcohol burn enough to do that? Like
I mean, you get enough of it.
In the comic book world, yes, of course.
So one of you homebrewer guys, supply me with some and we'll see.
Well, I myself have lit my farts on fire many a time. So, and sometimes I got airborne from it. I'm going to say this is scientifically accurate.
Yeah, there's a diagram here. It looks like there are a couple of chutes at the bottom that kind of redirect the exhaust away from the behind.
Yeah, I mean, they actually try and address this stuff, though. I mean, normally just put on the jetpack and then see what happens. And they even test this jetpack out by like cutting down the statue of Jebediah Springfield and then strapping it to the statue to see what happens.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and then our hero proceeds to have various misadventures with it in his first flight that are kind of played for laughs.
Well, I mean, even with the statue, it's played for laughs because it crash lands near them and then they pick it up and its head's half gone. And so Cliff's like, I guess we'll need a helmet.
Yeah.
And I think it was something that they didn't directly mention, but in the helmet, they add a rudder as a way to maneuver.
So that's that big spike thing is?
Yes.
Later in the movie, Howard Hughes comments on it and says that it's ingenious as a way to control the flights.
Yeah. I'm not an engineer, but I would think if you're going fairly quickly and you have a rudder on your helmet, you're likely to snap your neck if you look to the side. They kind of mention it that the engineer guy, Alan Arkin's character, says, look with your eyes, not your neck. Otherwise, you'll go flying off in any direction.
Yeah, good old Peeves.
Yeah, Peeves.
Peeves the poltergeist. No. I mean, You're right. They're at least trying to explain how this would work in reality, which whether or not they succeed is up for debate. But while watching this, I was completely convinced personally, okay, yeah, this is an actual jetpack that would work in the 1930s.
Yeah, I mean, here's the thing. They made it sound plausible enough. And that's part of the magic.
Exactly. I mean, it's kind of like the Mummy. They get several pieces of Egyptian history wrong, but it sounds plausible enough.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they did a good job in world building, I thought.
Yeah. No, definitely. But I think the next we move into the scene at the exposition, the flight exposition, where Cliff dons the outfit for the first time to save his friend.
That's a little later. First, we have to talk about Tim Dalton meeting with Paul Sorvino about stealing the rocket, which is a pretty standard. Yeah, it's a pretty standard gangster scene, and that's where we see Timothy Dalton in his mansion with a fencing sword because he's Errol Flynn. Even though, what was the character's name again? Neville Sinclair?
Okay. Neville Sinclair.
I mean, we're introduced to him demanding this rocket, and he really wants this rocket, but we're not actually told why he wants it until almost the very end of the film, where we find out, spoiler, he's a Nazi spy and he's getting it for the Germans. But he threatens and cajoles these gangsters to do whatever it takes. And by the way, here's my good friend Tiny here, who is 7 foot tall and can bust a brick with his hands.
The prosthetic face looks like a Neanderthal.
I mean, he's a total extra from Dick Tracy.
Yes,
absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, Neanderthals are better looking than this guy. This guy looks like a monster.
He does a good job of being that character.
Indeed. No, the mobster, Paul Sorvino's character's name is Eddie Valentine. Like, isn't there like a more mob name ever?
Childish Gambino.
Oh, there you go.
And so they send the heavy Tiny, or what's his name, Lauter
of the Hill People.
He goes to the injured gangster, gets him to tell him where the rocket is hidden, and then proceeds to break the gangster in half.
He literally folds him in half while the people who are supposed to be watching him are listening to a radio show and smoking.
Yeah. And then jumps out the window.
So apparently Lothar is a reference to this old school Hollywood actor named Rondo Hatton, who had the same sort of facial features as a result of this genetic disease. And unfortunately, he died fairly young, but he was in a bunch of stuff in the 30s.
Interesting.
He's an effective heavy.
Yes, he is.
He is.
He looks the part. He acts the part. They give him enough to do as kind of a big bad, like, because he breaks into Cliff and Peeves' house and proceeds to throw Cliff through the ceiling repeatedly.
When we say
the interrogation scene by bashing his head through the ceiling over and over again.
When we say breaks in, what we mean is he takes his hand and squeezes the doorknob until it's busted.
He just knocks on the door and the door caves in.
Yeah, this was Andre the Giant. If Andre the Giant was ugly
and mean,
I mean, Matt, kinda, but we're not here to discuss the appearance of Andre the Giant. What we're here to discuss is after that scene is when we're introduced to Jennifer Connelly living in that woman's hotel.
She's a would-be actress, and she's, I guess, not the best actress in the world, but she's trying. She's in a film with Sinclair, but she's someone in the background.
And she's a big fan of Dalton.
Yes.
She takes Cliff to see a movie that's starring him.
Yeah, and that's where we get kind of the background where the trailer or the newsreel before the film has Hitler promises he won't invade Czechoslovakia, and by the way, here's the peace mission from the Zeppelin, the Luxembourg, which is making its way around the world and due in California any minute now.
Yeah, here comes the bitchin' airship.
Yeah, basically. Which, I mean, that's what the Hindenburg kind of sort of was, but I mean, hey.
Yeah. I mean, in this world, I'm curious if the Hindenburg actually happened, since they have another Zeppelin running around the world.
Well, spoiler alert, technically it did.
Yeah, the Hindenburg happened like in the 36, 37, right?
Yeah.
It was around this time.
But this movie was taking place in 38 or 39, I believe.
All right.
So they all mentioned that it was filled with 1937 was when the Hindenburg was.
Yes.
But they mentioned that the Zeppelin is filled with explosive helium.
Hydrogen.
Hydrogen.
Yeah. So this movie takes place after the Hindenburg, so maybe it didn't happen. Otherwise, why would they be flying it around?
That's kind of my point. Like, no one mentions the Hindenburg at all.
Maybe Hitler's trying to prove a point. That was a one off.
Maybe. I don't know. It makes for a damn fine final act, and when it appears in the film, it makes an explosive entry. It just shows up from behind the LA Observatory and just encompasses the entire set, and it makes for a fantastic final scene.
All right. Well, what happens is they go into the movie theater, they see the newsreel. Cliff is making comments the entire time about how much Hitler sucks. And I think they leave before we see anything from the actual movie, or at least we cut away.
Oh, yeah, that's right. The only thing we do see is the reel about how, Hitler promises not to invade Czechoslovakia.
Well, how'd that work out, people?
and so he takes, being the true gentleman that he is, he takes her to the dive bar where all his friends hang out, all these other pilots.
It's a pilot dive bar.
Everybody knows her. She knows everybody. So obviously this is where they always go. And she even makes a point of saying, can't we go somewhere else? Can't we go somewhere nicer?
Including, I believe one of the pilots is J.F. Sebastian from Blade Runner.
I don't know.
Anyone else recognize him?
Sebastian, you're talking about the character Sebastian, the sickly guy?
Yeah, him.
Okay, I didn't recognize him.
There were tons of people that I recognized from somewhere. It was amazing. Oh, and I don't know if you noticed, but our good friend Dick Warlock is in this movie.
Who is he?
He was actually one of the FBI agents, who just random guy in the background. I happened to catch his name actually. But basically he's known for being a stuntman, and he's got the occasional like acting credit. Yeah, but
Yeah, okay.
I always giggle because a name like Dick Warlock, that's pretty freaking awesome.
Well, I imagine that's what you personally, Charlie, dream at night.
I was gonna say, I mean, if I can find myself a man who goes by the name Dick Warlock, I've got it all.
Oh
By-
my.
Oh my! By the way, yes, that was indeed J.F. Sebastian. William Sanderson is the actor, and his character, Charlie, go ahead and perk up, was named Skeets.
Skeets. Okay.
Eats. Okay, yeah. But I mean, it's very reminiscent of the diner scene in Spaceballs. It's just a bunch of ne'er-do-wells sat at the bar harassing the owner / waitress, and things kind of happen around them, but they're always kind of putting themselves into other people's conversations.
It's your typical, yeah.
Yep.
And they proceed to embarrass our hero in front of his girlfriend because he didn't tell her he nearly died.
He said that
And
was
she
an
gets-
accident, but they said, "Oh man, like that, you're lucky to walk away from that."
Well, he doesn't
Apparent-
tell her that his plane got destroyed, so he
Yeah.
has no way to make money off what he's doing.
I think he said it was a couple of bumps on the landing.
Yeah, and this apparently is a bad habit of his because she keeps complaining about how she's always the last to know.
Yeah.
Now,
He does strike me as kind of a not reliable person.
here's the problem though at this part of the movie. After the opening shootout and the opening takeoff, everything up to here has just been kind of slow paced and boring.
Yeah.
Yeah, it doesn't
Yeah.
it gets better in the second half. We still have to sit through the first half.
Yeah, and I mean, this is kind of important to establish the characters, but there had to be a better way to do this. Like, frankly, I would have loved to see the clown show happen, and while he's in midair, Cliff finds the rocket in the middle of his old dilapidated plane.
Maybe.
It's funny that for a movie that the movie did seem to drag on at times, but when you think about it, there's a lot of different scenes that are happening. And it's not like we're spending too long on one individual scene. It's just so many scenes, and we're spending a short time on each one, but it's just progressing the story slowly.
Well,
It isn't until, like you said, the latter half that things start speeding up.
Yeah.
plus it kind of overlaps too often. Like, Neville Sinclair and the gangsters are supposed to be working together to find the rocket, but then at sometimes they're separate and one party doesn't know what the other's doing. No one except Sinclair appears to know about Lauter, so he'll show up and throw a wrench into everything. It's kind of hard at times to keep track of what exactly is going on.
Well,
And I think they could have done a better job of that. I mean, it becomes clear by the end that Lothar and Neville Sinclair are the bad guys. They are the Nazis. Okay. And Eddie Valentine and his mob boys are the criminals that are working for Neville Sinclair, but then, change their mind because they're good old Americans,
and
Which makes for a great scene.
It does at the
he
end.
keeps treating him like crap the entire movie. So
Yeah.
It's
I
not
thought
like to
honestly
start
the
with.
third act is where this movie is strongest because there's a good
Yeah.
amount of action. All the plot points come together. It works really well.
Oh,
It-
this is the
it
final
moves
boss
fast.
fight. This is the final, I think I said boss fight on the airship from BioShock Infinite.
Mhm.
Yeah.
You've
That's
ever
exactly
played
right.
that? Yeah.
Yeah, basically, once they get to the Griffin Observatory, from then on, it is just super downhill
Quick.
from there.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, before then, we have to get through a bunch of other scenes. But luckily, one of these scenes is a very amusing one with Neville Sinclair shooting an Adventures of Robin Hood-esque movie where Jenny's an extra.
Mhm.
Yeah, and Cliff proceeds to make an ass of himself by wandering into the scene and getting her fired.
Mhm.
Yep.
But then in one of the easiest ways, or I don't know, like it's very contrived, but at the same time it kind of works. Sinclair finds out that Cliff has the rocket because Cliff is trying to tell Jenny, I came here as soon as I could because I have this rocket thing. And Sinclair overhears him. Jenny says, I don't care, go away. You ruined my career, as she's fired.
So in
Sinclair-
other words, at this point, Cliff admits he's a rocket man. Rocket
Something.
Out
Yeah.
here alone. That's my William Shatner, but
And Sinclair
right.
knows that the best way to get to Cliff, because he loses Cliff, the best way to get to Cliff is through Jennifer.
Yes.
Jenny. And so he sidles up to her, says, you should be the lead in this play or this movie.
Because apparently the lead actress was the producer's niece who can't act.
Yeah,
Take 28, they said.
the PG version of the casting couch.
Yeah. Sinclair says, you should be the lead. By the way, let's have dinner tomorrow night.
What was the name of that club? That big 1930s?
Cotton
Something
Club?
with the C.
Cotton Club?
It wasn't the Cotton Club. That would make no sense, but it was one of those big old-fashioned Hollywood clubs.
Yeah.
Yes.
And we're probably going to get emails from some...
I mean, it's a gorgeous set. It's a gorgeous club, wherever it is.
Yeah. And after that initial meet...
The South Seas Club.
The South Seas Club, that's it.
Even though there's no nautical theme to it whatsoever.
There's a big old shell. You sing
There's
it.
that giant shell.
I was about to say, except for the clam in the middle.
Yeah.
Well, immediately after that little meet cute bit on the set where Timothy Dalton gets a wall dropped on him, which is thanks to Cliff, that's when we get to the air show where the Rocketeer is introduced, which... How again did they determine the Rocketeer's name? Like John Polito's looking out a window and sees Pioneer Motors or something?
Yeah, all the press types are talking to him like, what's this guy's name? This is your show. What is his name? It's Rocket Boy, Rocket Man. And the guy sees Pioneer Gas. He's like, what about the Rocketeer? Oh, yeah, dude, you're right.
I'm a rocket man. I'm going to keep doing that every time anyone says that here. But I mean, and I think Matt alluded to this earlier. This is when one of Cliff's friends tries to do the flying and clown makeup bit, but the plane he's using is broken. So he starts going down, and that's when Cliff straps on the rocket.
Cliff goes up to save him because he went up because he overheard the owner talking to Alan Arkin. If Cliff isn't there to go up, then you guys are out. We're getting rid of you guys. You have no place to be. And so the old guy hears it. He goes up in Cliff's spot, but he hasn't flown a plane since World War I, and the plane is not in the best of shape. So it immediately starts collapsing.
This is the guy who said he was almost shot down by Snoopy in 1917.
The Red Baron.
Yes, the Red Baron.
Okay, yeah, so it's that guy. But anyway, you can assume how this turns out. Cliff saves the day, but one of the amazing things about this is how often he almost dies because he turns the rocket off.
Yeah, like they this, talking about the scenes going on too long. He gets onto the plane and falls off again 3 times. They could have been twice.
I guess it establishes that he doesn't really know what he's doing, but it did go on a bit long.
Yeah, I think the repetition of him falling off the plane 3 times was a bit much. 2 times would have been perfect to show that he was still trying to figure it out.
Well, there's a scene during here where he's like flying close to the ground and like nearly hits several trees. He flies through a cornfield, which their punchline here is damn big gopher. My punchline was Paul Newman's gonna have my legs broke. But he eventually lands in like this pond, and that puts the fuel out. It goes on for a long time, well after we've established how the Rocketeer's an amateur, which doesn't work.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
No, absolutely. They could have cut that back a little bit.
A
And
little
then the
bit.
mob nearly catches them.
Oh,
Oh,
yeah,
that's right.
like everyone's
Yeah.
catching them, and the FBI now knows where their missing government property is.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah. No, the getaway is amusing. He has him put the a car into neutral and activates the rocket from the back of the truck.
Now, here's the weirdest
And
part.
gets them going super fast.
Hmm.
Now, here's the weirdest part of all this. A lot of people see it. A lot of people get this on video. All the papers the next day are going to be talking about this, but it somehow takes a while to try and figure out who the Rocketeer is. Like Howard Hughes doesn't write to this airfield and say, "Hey, I want my property back." The FBI takes forever to show up. Even the Nazis don't say anything about it. That was just really strange how the Rocketeer is simultaneously a celebrity but not a celebrity.
Yay for a press cycle where it takes like a day or two to print a newspaper. So I think the movie takes place over maybe a couple days.
Yeah. And to be honest, I mean, this is also back in the late 30s. I mean, all they had to go on was like word of mouth. So I can see them taking a couple days to track down who the individual was.
I mean, the specific individual, sure, but there was a lot of clues to point people in the right direction.
Well, Franken Lauter finds Cliff's house like the next day, and then we have some Tommy guns.
Well, he did what we were just saying. Like he knows that the Rocketeer was at this air show, so he goes to the guy who owned the air show, proceeds to kill him, and gets the address to Cliff.
That's right. He folds John Polito in half, like literally.
Oh, that's when we get Cliff getting shoved through the ceiling and everything busted up while he's looking for the rocket. And while he's doing that, the FBI show up outside and start shooting everything.
They destroy that building with their gunfire.
And Lothar's dual wielding pistols. There's like 5 or 6 guys with Tommy guns. No, people only get winged at best, but as Peeve points it out, we have a gazebo now.
Yeah,
we don't have a home,
and so and Peavy and Cliff were able to slip away in the chaos
with the MacGuffin.
Yep, because it was under a lampshade.
Or he slips away with So the gangster gets the plans to the rocket, but Cliff and Peeves manage to get away with the rocket itself.
They do, but at the end of the day, they realize how much they're losing through this endeavor. So Alan Arkin's like saying, call the FBI and give this fucking thing back.
And Cliff agrees. He realizes that it's too much trouble and he's going to give it back. But then, of course, by that point, they know who he is and they know who his girlfriend is, because of that scene that happened on the soundstage in front of Neville Sinclair.
Yeah. And so that's when Sinclair goes on his date with Jenny.
Mm-hmm.
And Cliff ends up crashing it, saying, "I'm the Rocketeer." And she has no idea what he's talking about. Yeah. Again, going back to that slow news cycle.
Yeah, he managed to pretend to be a waiter to lure her into a bush.
Haven't we all?
That's how I got my prom date. Anyway,
I'll give that a try. You guys can bail me out of prison.
I was going to say, that's how I got my restraining order.
No, Matt, I don't think I will be doing that for you.
You really need to do a Captain America thing there. No, I don't think I will.
God damn it, I'm getting edited on the fly.
Yeah, so I say we move on from the concept of luring women into shrubbery.
What would I use? Reese's Pieces?
No, if it's a shrubbery, you would have to clearly use a herring.
Maybe some elderberries too.
I'm sorry, what was that?
Maybe some elderberries too.
Exactly.
All righty.
Yeah.
So then all hell explodes when Sinclair kidnaps Jenny, and the mobsters attack the Rocketeer, who's trying to escape, and he ends up flying through the skylight.
Although
Yeah.
Jenny gets in her, one of the two things she does, her specialty seems to be jacking unexpected men with bottles, because she manages to knock out Lothar.
Yeah.
That's
Well,
true.
let's not gloss over the absolute chaos and comedy that comes from Cliff trying to fly that rocket inside of a nightclub. The whole scene was done for laughs. It was him just crashing into things, awkwardly flying around, blasting tables, people freaking out. It was pretty awesome, actually.
And then he
He's just going
flies
round and
through
round
a
and round.
ceiling, and then everyone's running out.
Mm-hmm.
And then Jenny runs back in, and that's when problems happen.
Well, here's
Yeah.
one of the things, though, about this scene. Lothar is there, and some of the mobsters who were, I don't think we mentioned this in that scene earlier, where like 4 of them end up at the diner that all the pilots hang out at and start like pumping people for information.
Yeah,
when money,
and that
when
was
money
at the
doesn't
beginning.
work, then the
That's how
torture
Cliff
starts.
found out.
Right. That's how we found out there was something going on, because Cliff was on the phone with the FBI at that point and was about to turn himself in. But there's that whole scene where they're there and they're like knocking over pie trays and shooting the radio, and 2 of them end up going to this club. The other 2 stay at the diner where Cliff is, even though they don't know it's Cliff. And Lothar and those 2 gangsters end up like chasing Cliff themselves. And I'm like, are these people operating independently? Are they together? What's going on here?
I figure maybe the Sinclair and the mobsters, even before the Nazi reveal, don't get along. So maybe they're not talking to each other as much as they should.
Well, yeah, but I mean, if I was Lothar and I noticed 2 people with guns running in the same direction I was, I'd have at least tried to trip them up.
I think Lothar was in the know, but the mobsters were not.
Yeah.
That's fair.
Well, I mean, we're told when the reveal happens that Cliff tells them that he's a Nazi. Valentine even goes so far to say, like, I may not make my living legally, but I'm still an American. And he turns on Sinclair.
Also,
And,
in the diner scene, how does Sinclair exactly find out that his waiter was the Rocketeer? I mean, there's that scrap of paper in Jenny's tomato soup that he
I
finds.
think that's because that's very significant that happens. They focus on that very much. Does anyone know what was written on that? I can't remember.
I couldn't.
Meet me at the fountain.
Oh, okay. So it was from their phone call earlier, I guess.
Well,
and the gangsters knew. The gangsters saw her picture and number in the pilot bar.
Yeah, that's what happens is that, while, Neville and Jenny are starting their date, and while Neville and Jenny are starting their date, that's when, Cliff and everyone else is at the bar, and the mobsters come in, and they basically put 2 and 2 together, and they notice the name Jenny. They notice, all that. They call it in to their boss. They find out that that Jenny is currently on a date with Neville, and 2 of them decide to go there to let him know.
Because they have the same confusion we have. Like, they're thinking, why is our boss on a date with the girlfriend of the Rocketeer who we're sent to find?
Exactly.
This is what happens when you don't have cell phones.
And so when everyone converges on the 7 Seas, is that what it's called?
The South Seas.
The South Seas. That's when all the chaos happens. That's when, Cliff starts running around in the waiter's suit, trying to get Jenny out of there. Finally, he convinces her. She thinks he's just being an overbearing, jealous boyfriend, but he gets it through to her that, hey, this isn't a good scene. She runs out, and then all of a sudden, 2 of the mobsters who were at the bar recognize Cliff at the South Seas, and that's when everything happens.
Yeah, it's a big convergence between everyone here, almost to the point where I wanted to sync this up to the Benny Hill theme.
Oh, absolutely.
Oh, that's a good one.
And although we've mentioned what happens at the end, the Rocketeer escapes through the stained glass roof of this club, and Dalton kidnaps Jenny. We'll go and skip over some of this. He tries to seduce her, but she finds a secret closet in his home that's got a bunch of Nazi regalia, as well as the blueprints to the rocket.
And a radio where he's directly connected to someone who's speaking German.
Right, and she stuffs those blueprints down her cleavage, by the way, which normally I wouldn't mention, but it becomes important later.
Chekhov's
yes,
boobs.
it's important cleavage.
Chekhov's boobs, exactly.
Yeah, I mentioned this is the second time she knocks out a man who doesn't take her seriously.
Yep, you're right. She does. She what was it, like a bottle of cologne or something that she?
Yeah, she lures him into his closet of women's clothing. I wonder if J. Edgar Hoover was involved somehow. And then when he's like, she's like, can you help me take this dress off? He's like, sure, crunch. You know, Our Lady of the ceramic bottle to the skull.
I've been to those church services before. Surprisingly boring. But another thing I want to go ahead and skip through is Alan Arkin and Howard Hughes apparently meet up, and he explained what happens, and the FBI gets Cliff and they take him to Hughes so they can find out where the rocket is. Also, during the shootout in the diner with the remaining two gangsters that Cliff helps subdue, they go up into the attic where they're stashing the rocket, and a hole's been shot into it.
Yep.
So they need a patch, which normally would take several hours, but what they do is use that old piece of chewing gum that Cliff sticks to every plane he flies and use it to patch up the fuel hole. Because
Chekhov's gum.
Chekhov's gum.
You know, Matt, sometimes your dad jokes are perfect. Mwah.
I live to serve.
Very good, sir. Very good. But that becomes important later. Anyway, Cliff meets Howard Hughes and the FBI, and they explain what's going on, which is that the Nazis want to use this pack to form some sort of new Air Force division.
Yes, it's one of those classic. They show this video, and it's one of those classic animation reels that show the progression of Germany across Europe with these men with rockets on their backs, and they move out through Europe, and then they make their way over to the United States, and they attack the Capitol, and all of a sudden American flags are burning, being replaced by Nazi flags. It's completely epic, fitting with the genre, fitting with the time period of all the propaganda films. It's amazing. I love it.
Goering was definitely masturbating to this film, but anyway, yeah, now you've got that image in your head.
At some point, they called Cliff to tell him that they have Jenny and he better bring the rocket pack, and the FBI is like, no, you're not.
So of course, Cliff escapes and takes the rocket to the rendezvous point
via the Spruce Goose model.
Observatory.
Yeah.
Via the Spruce Goose model, like I think you said earlier, John.
That's right, yeah. And they just seem to let him go. It's like, well, he's running away. We can't possibly reach him.
Well, maybe they figured they could follow him, which I think they end up doing.
Yeah, but the FBI is just completely incompetent in this.
It's very out of character for them.
Maybe the Los Angeles division was like the JV.
Maybe. So he tries to turn himself in, and he's surrounded by gangsters, and Sinclair has Jenny, and Sinclair says, turn over the rocket and you can have Jenny. And that's when Cliff lets slip to the gangsters, what's it like working for a Nazi?
Yeah.
The gangsters
He plays the only card he has, and he plays it well.
He does.
Well, even before then, Sinclair's demanding he drop. No, wait, excuse me. That happens a little later. But yeah, during this scene, it's like, is he going to surrender the rocket? And then he plays the one card he has.
Yeah, and it works out fantastic as plot required.
Yeah.
And the gangsters turn on Sinclair, who then basically whistles, and a battalion of Nazis show up out of nowhere, and a gunfight ensues.
Oh yeah, everybody's
Oh,
shooting
and then
at
the
everybody.
FBI agents show up, and so
And
now
that's-
you've got the FBI, the mob, and the Germans all shooting, and of course, the mob, the gangsters, like throw in with the FBI in the inevitable comedy scene in which they look at each other and they're shooting at the Germans, and they're just like shrugging because what else are you gonna do?
Yeah, it's a good scene.
It is. It's another wink and a nod. It's beautiful. It fits well with the genre.
Well, the Italian mob hated Mussolini, so that would make some sense.
Yeah. Although I really like Paul Sorvino's line, I've never made an honest buck, but that doesn't mean I'm not 100% American.
Yeah.
Mhm. Absolutely.
And of course, while the gunfight is happening, the airship appears overhead because you need it.
Well, that's probably how the Nazis got there. I mean, you could probably fit 20 or 30 guys in it.
That's
Yeah,
always
so-
what bothered me about airships, that they're massive things, but they have very tiny seating.
Yeah.
Well,
the
limited-
third act essentially takes place in the cabin, and
Yeah.
it is dinky. You can fit
And there's like
6 people in it.
Yeah, and there is like 6 people in there, and like everyone on board except the heroes die.
Well, they all get tossed out the side.
Yeah,
Bye-bye.
except for Mr. Dalton, because a lot of stuff happens here. There's a scene where the Rocketeer gets on the rudder and starts taking them down. Lothar goes out and tries to beat him up, a la the villain in Die Hard 2. But
And unlike a lot of villains, which I give him plot for or credit for, unlike a lot of villains in similar type situations, he's got a belt that moors him to the airship. So if he gets knocked off, he'll just kind of hang around.
except that turns out to be the pilot's undoing, because he does get knocked out and he like flies through the cabin's window, and then the pilot falls out the other window and dies.
But Lothar survived
True.
For now.
True.
for now.
Until he's trying to get off of the exploding Zeppelin,
Yeah,
and
go figure. Once it starts exploding, that anchor really becomes an anchor around him.
a detriment.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I mean, it all comes to a head on the Zeppelin. You've got basically Neville Sinclair's plan is that we've got the girl, the rocket will come to us, and sure enough, of course, Cliff shows up, tries to save the day, has a little bit of a fight with Lothar. Lothar gets knocked off, busts through the window, starts, that's when Cliff shows up. There's fighting. Everyone's falling out of the Zeppelin.
Did I mention Jenny's got a gun?
Yeah.
Ah,
And which ends up setting the whole thing on fire.
it's a flare gun that she
It
finds
is a
on
flare
board.
Because
Yeah.
when you're on a Zeppelin filled with hydrogen, why not just shoot off a flare gun?
I don't
For
know.
that matter, who in their right mind brings a flare gun onto a freaking Zeppelin filled with hydrogen?
Someone who they probably hope is a good shot.
I reckon.
I guess they didn't expect you to shoot it into the Zeppelin.
I think she was trying to shoot Sinclair and it bounced off something.
So everything goes up in flames, like of course it does.
And
Of course.
Dalton
Sinclair-
tries to steal the rocket, but during the handover, that's when we get Cliff pulling the chewing gum slightly off that hole.
So the gas is leaking.
Yes.
Yep. So the alcohol is leaking out.
And so Sinclair basically says, "Bye, guys." And he pieces out, jumps out and uses the rocket, and it blows up.
It explodes, and then he crashes into the land part of the old Hollywood land sign.
Yeah. That was a bit contrived, but what are you gonna do?
Yeah.
You
Again,
know
it's nailing the idea that we're in the 1930s.
At this point, I felt the movie had earned it.
That's fair.
So somehow they get to the top of the Zeppelin through all the burningness.
The inside's burning, so they climb up the ladder to the top, and apparently Howard Hughes is on the way.
In his gyrocopter.
With Alan Arkin.
Gyrocopter.
And they were rescued by, let's say Mo. But no, it's Howard Hughes and his private plane with Alan Arkin, I think, is there.
Yeah.
Yep. PV.
They throw a ladder down.
Yeah,
and as things are blowing up, they
jump
on the ladder, and Lauter is running with them because he's not stupid, and he gets caught with the tether, and he gets caught in the explosion.
Yep. So he's gone, and Jenny and Cliff live, and then we smash cut to the morning after or the week after.
Yeah,
definitely some time after,
because we've established that Sinclair has died in a tragic accident when the Zeppelin fell on his tour bus.
Yeah, nice cover there. And they're having breakfast, and then there's a little bit of a commotion outside of the pilot's bar.
Yep,
and it's Howard Hughes.
Yep, that's good old Howard Hughes landing his plane, quote unquote, his plane. And then he gives it to Cliff as a thank you for making sure the rocket didn't fall into the wrong hands, I guess.
Destroying his one and only prototype rocket. Yeah, sure. Definitely.
Well, he didn't want to rebuild it, though, because he already thought it was lost.
That's true.
Yeah, he didn't want it being used as a weapon, and he knew that if he made anything even remotely like that, it would be a weapon.
Yep.
And I guess at this point, he's probably still smarting. Like I said earlier, it was his plane that was used as a prototype for the Japanese Zero plane. And he probably was of the idea that if I build anything that can be used as a weapon, someone will turn it into a weapon.
Yeah.
True that. So it's a happy ending all around,
Sequel hooked, because guess who still has the blueprints in her cleavage?
That would be Jenny, who gives it over to Peeves.
Yeah.
Well, technically, they did do sort of a follow-up.
Yeah, the Disney show.
The Disney show. She's the great-granddaughter of Cliff Seekert, and she has inherited the family rocket.
Yeah, hey. Phrasing.
Yeah, so while Cliff and Jenny are making out on the airplane, Peeves goes off to do science.
And then everyone else comes out to see the plane that Howard Hughes delivered.
That's true. A bunch of 1939 yokels standing around pointing and gawking and touching.
And that's how this movie ends.
Yeah,
pretty much.
And apparently, so the TV show was canceled after one season. I guess there's rumors of a sequel being made.
Yeah, it's one of the Tuskegee Airmen.
Oh, that'd be interesting.
Oh, neat. Okay.
Oh, that would be interesting. Yeah.
Yeah.
But
but it bombed at the box office,
which is just disappointing because it is an amazing movie. I love it.
Life is pain, children.
Yeah, I'm looking at the Wikipedia, and somewhere in here it basically said like this was in like they started pitching it in the mid '80s.
Well, that's when the comic came out.
Yeah, the comic came out, and when they were pitching it, like Batman hadn't happened yet. The various superhero movies hadn't happened, and the only reason Disney was really making it was because it thought there would be a toy line and licensing involved with it. And when it didn't do well at the theater, they pulled everything. They just said, we're not doing anything with anything here because it's not worth it.
Well, that's a shame. But in the meantime, I think we were all thoroughly entertained. So let's go around the horn and do final thoughts. Let's start with Charlie.
Well, I love this movie. I thought it had everything. It was a great adventure movie that really, as you point out, was in the vein of like Indiana Jones. It had some fantastic diesel pump concepts. I thought that the way it captured the spirit of that late 30s through the dialogue, through the costuming, through, basically the whole feel, the motif of what they were trying to accomplish was just amazing. I love it. I think it's a beautiful movie. I think it's a fun movie. The effects were They weren't amazing by 2020 standards, 2021 standards, but they were amazing for 1991. I was impressed, and I'm
Hey,
still
no
vaguely
crappy
impressed.
CGI.
Yeah, I'm still vaguely impressed. But bottom line is, it's a great movie. It's a fun family movie. They definitely should do a high quality either remake or reboot, or a sequel. I think that it's a wonderful movie to watch with your family. And, you know, what more do you want?
All right. Thanks a lot, Charlie. Matt, what about you?
I liked it, not as much as Charlie, but I did like it, especially the second half. So it's definitely worth seeing at least once. I mean, you probably get it on a DVD or Blu-ray pretty cheap.
And it's on Disney Plus as well, if anyone's interested. John, let's follow up with you.
I love this film. Like I said, I don't think I've seen it possibly since the first time I saw it decades ago, and it still kind of holds up pretty well. And I love the 1930s atmosphere. I think they nail it. Whoever did the set design was fantastic, and the costume design, they really did it. The music was on par. The special effects, I think, were Lucasfilm or ILM, and for the time they were fantastic. Looking back on it, you can really tell when they kind of used a blue screen, but they used enough practical effects, I think, that it still holds strong. And Timothy Dalton is a fantastic villain, and I wish he would do that more often. And yeah, I love it. It's a fantastic film.
All right. Thank you, John. So I thought at times this movie was kind of tedious, especially in the first act, because it took too long for them to find the rocket and for them to really get everything going. But there's a lot of great adventure scenes in this, and the cast is great. I mean, especially with Timothy Dalton as a Nazi villain. This was only like what, I think 2 years after his last James Bond movie. John could probably confirm that, but I think I'm right. But either way,
Yeah.
this is a lot of fun. I'm not sure if I would have paid full price to see it in the theaters, but again, it's on Disney Plus. If you're looking for something that's actually a little more family friendly, which by I mean adults might enjoy, you might get a kick out of this.
Yeah, I mean, little kids aren't going to get some of the skeezy Hollywood stuff. I didn't remember getting it when I was little, although I remember my mom had to explain to me what chloroforming was.
Oh boy, that I'm sure was a fun conversation.
Well, it was mostly just, knocking someone out with chemicals. It probably wasn't complicated.
Wait, are you talking about the description of chloroforming that you got, or the actual process?
What exactly he did, because I vaguely remember that, and I didn't know it was happening.
Oh, fun times. Anyway, though, we are out of time for this week. I'd like to thank our three panelists for joining me. This has been a bit of a fun experiment, and unfortunately, or fortunately, you're stuck with me for the rest of the season as Nick is on leave. He might show up on a random episode here and there, but in the meantime, I will be serving as your host for the rest of this season. And let's go out round the horn and plug whatever we've got. Starting with you, Charlie.
I don't have anything to plug. This is really the only thing that I do that's creative. I love it. So there you go.
All right. Thanks so much, John.
Well, as I said at the top, I am the host of Mission Briefing, the James Bond podcast, and we come out every couple of months with a new episode. But look forward to a special episode of No Time to Die when that eventually comes out, and we finally get to see it after so many months of waiting.
Since last April, and that will definitely be coming out as close as we can to the release date. Right. And Matt.
Well, I mentioned earlier I was an Atlanta author, Matthew W. Quinn. I have a steampunk fantasy series called Battle for the Wastelands. And having seen this movie, I want to plug in rocket packs somehow. Maybe a specialized thing or a science project that goes wrong.
Everything's better with rocket packs.
I mean, the book already has dirigibles.
You can find Matt at local bookstores for occasional signing events and local conventions. Definitely check out his stuff. And in the meantime, I've been Daniel, your replacement host for now. I've thank you very much for tuning in. Please subscribe. Please rate us on iTunes or wherever you get your podcast. Check out our Patreon, patreon.com/myopia movies, I believe, or just go to Patreon and do a search. And thanks, guys.
Myopia Movies is produced by Nick Hoffman and Daniel Settis. It is hosted by Nick Hoffman and Daniel Settis. Mission Briefing is hosted by John Copsey. Podcasts are edited by Daniel Settis, and Patreon is edited by Nick Hoffman. Our engineer is Nick Hoffman. The theme song is Surf Shimmy by Kevin MacLeod from Incomptech.com. Licensed under Creative Commons by Attribution 3.0 license. Myopia Movies is a podcast production of Dude Letter Podcasting and is produced by Nick Hoffman. It is edited by Nerd Trinet and Daniel Settis and is hosted by Nick Hoffman, with production assistance by Matthew Quinn, Daniel Settis, and Nerd Trinet. The theme song is Surf Shimmy by Kevin MacLeod from Incomptech.com. Licensed under the Creative Commons by Attribution 4 license, Creative Commons /licenses by /4.0. Thanks.